Joan Miró is one of the key artists of the 20th century, along with Picasso and Matisse.
Miró is not only one of our great masters of modern art, his work is so wholehearted and joyful.
Miró was one of the most important artists of the 20th century because of his constant need and desire for innovation, his tremendous influence amongst generations of international artists, and his continuing legacy today.
The images may surprise you, delight you, intrigue you, confound you. The colors, symbols, forms, and textures may challenge your ideas about art and open your eyes to a strange and fantastical world of imagination and creativity.
Miró was constantly pushing his own creative boundaries. And in the last 20 years of his life, Miró was really after tapping into that fundamental essence of human creativity and trying to present that through his paintings, sculptures, and works on paper.
Miró, the experience of seeing. Next on UNC TV.
A production of UNC TV and the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University. Major funding for Miró, the Experience of Seeing, is provided by a grant from the William R. Keenan Jr. Charitable Trust. And by the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
You feel the sense of excitement as you enter the galleries of the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University. The special exhibition, Miró, the Experience of Seeing, immediately captures the eye with colors, images, and objects that beckon and startle. Here are more than 50 works by the renowned modern artist Joan Miró. Drawings, paintings, and sculptures created during the final 20 years of his life.
These works all come from the Reina Sofia, the National Museum for Contemporary Art in Madrid. It's a philosophy of the Reina Sofia Museum to share its collection, and the curator from the Reina Sofia worked in partnership with the Seattle Art Museum.
The exhibition opened in Seattle and then traveled to the Nasher Museum, where it will remain as the only East Coast venue until February 22nd, 2015.
This body of work, these drawings, paintings, and sculptures, will be a discovery for people.
Joan Miró was born in Barcelona in 1893 and by nature and by birth identified himself not as a Spaniard but as a Catalan.
The fact that Miró was born in Barcelona is key to his work. If you go to Barcelona, it has a feeling that is entirely different from the rest of Spain. The Catalans are very free and independent spirits. So the fact that he is Catalan, that connection to his motherland is essential to his work, absolutely essential.
As the son of a middle-class Catalan family, of course his father naturally wanted his son to go into business and to make a life for himself. And an artistic career in those days, as it is today, was certainly an unassured enterprise. And so he was forced to follow a business career and had a nervous breakdown because he was so unsuited to it, and recovered at an early age at his family's farm. And that experience completely revitalized Miró. And from that point onward, the relationship he maintained to the land, to rural Catalonia, was transformed into the staple of his subject matter in art. Miró's first trip to Paris was in March of 1920. And for him, and for really most artists in this period, Paris was the capital of the avant-garde.
Paris in the 1920s was a very exciting place. Cubism had been invented by Picasso and Braque several years earlier. The war had ended. There was a sense of anything is possible. The Surrealists were beginning to emerge. And for an artist with a desire to really make a name for him or herself, Paris was the Mecca.
Upon his arrival in Paris, Miró introduced himself to a fellow Spanish artist, Pablo Picasso.
Picasso was slightly older than Miró, and I think Miró thought of Picasso as a friend, something of a mentor. Picasso at the time when Miró arrived in Paris was already quite well known. So for Miró, I think he provided quite a bit of inspiration.
Miró and Picasso's friendship will last a lifetime.
He really became his own person when he met the Surrealists, André Breton and the Surrealist group. I think Miró was attracted to Surrealism because of the interests that the Surrealists had in the unconscious. Giving birth to what was inside was extremely important, what was in the heart, what was in the soul, actually. And that becomes, of course, his subject matter.
By the early 1930s, Miró has married and fathered a daughter. As he continues to pursue his artistic career, the family splits its time between Barcelona and Paris. But in 1936, when General Francisco Franco, aided by the German Nazis and Italian fascists, stages a coup against the Spanish Republican government, Miró heads into self-imposed exile in France.
When one looks at Miró's work between 1934 and 1939, there is such an iconography of violence and of turbulence, aggressive, hideously deformed features. And this, of course, was his expression of the bloodletting that was taking place in the European and ultimately in the world theater. In 1937, Miró was commissioned to do a mural for the Spanish Republican Pavilion at the Paris World's Fair. And this was a huge international exhibition.
Clearly, the Republican government felt like this was a good opportunity to present their notion of what Spain should be to the world. And they commissioned Picasso to paint his very now famous mural, Guernica. Alexander Calder designed a Mercury fountain. But Miró painted a large mural called Le Faucheur, the Reaper, and it was really a portrait of a Catalan peasant in a very powerful pose.
And sadly, and it was a very important mural, sadly it was lost when the Paris World's Fair was over. Nobody knows what happened to it.
As the Spanish Civil War ends with Franco's forces victorious, and as Hitler's troops begin invading the countries of Europe, Miró turns more deeply to his art.
As Paris was about to fall in 1940, Miró fled the French capital and went to a little village called Varengeville in Normandy, where he executed an extraordinary series of works between 1940 and 1941 that are called constellations, which were then completed in Mallorca.
For many, they're perhaps his best-known works. He fills the page with little ciphers, stars, curlicues, figures, objects that were abstracted in the extreme, much more so than before, and filled the page. And when they were shown in New York at the Pierre Matisse Gallery in the 1940s, they made a major impression on the public.
Though the end of World War II will bring freedom to much of Europe. In Spain, Franco's oppressive dictatorship forces Miró to keep a low profile. Yet over the next 10 years, as his artistic output continues, his international fame grows through important commissions and prestigious awards.
In 1956, Miró moves into his new studio designed by his old friend, the architect Josep Luis Sert, who had been running the architecture program at Harvard. He's an internationally renowned architect, a fellow Catalonian, and old friends with Miró. For the first time, he brought all of this work together, and so it gave him an opportunity to reflect on several decades of his career. And it really was the catalyst for successive decades of creativity for Miró.
The concept of the show is the moment that he had enough money that he could commission a big studio for himself was the moment when, for the first time in his life, he was able to gather all the work that he had done before that was scattered in all these other places. And when he did that, he thought anew about what he was doing, about his own pictorial language.
What was really important for Miró, and he talks about this at great length, was to break traditional molds and to think about his painting and a very rich vocabulary of visual signs as a kind of painting poetry.
It's important to understand that Miró stressed that he was not an abstract artist. He drew entirely from the real world in the creation of his works. And so there's a difference between abstract or non-representational and abstracted. And Miró really drew on what he saw to create these abstracted forms. In the 1920s, Miró really begins to codify his lexicon and works with a number of images, objects, the star, the woman figure, bird. He's developing this language, this visual language that he will use for the rest of his life.
The sense that most people have, especially in Miró's more Spartan paintings in particular, is that, there's just this quick, immediate, spontaneous gesture that Miró stands before the canvas, lays down a few lines, and that's the end of it. That belies the extraordinarily methodical quality of his work.
One of my favorite paintings in this show is called The Dance of the Poppies. It's a very large canvas, and on the background is just white paint, but very gestural. In The Dance of the Poppies, there is simply one black line, a second black line, and 3 dots of red. Those lines, though, which look so spontaneous, Miró would deliberate about those lines, practice those lines forever.
Even during his last years, Miró remained unbelievably creative and had a very strong output. What we can see in the exhibition is that this included works on paper, paintings, but specifically sculpture. And he spent the last 20 years of his life creating this wonderful body of sculpture that is not very well known. When he moved into his new studio in Mallorca, there's an anecdote about how he gathered all of these objects from the dump, from the beach, from his walks in the countryside, and collected them in his studio.
Sometimes months, weeks, or even years later, the objects would speak to him, and he would begin almost in a kind of alchemical process, somewhat magically putting these objects together.
One of my favorite of the sculptures is called Figure and Bird, and it's a shape for the torso of the body of the figure. You can't tell what it was originally, but it looks as if it was cloth wrapped around something, because you can see folds. And then the head is comprised of a basket, an old basket that's been smushed, actually. It's a basket that they use today still in harvesting grapes. And it has 2 handles on the side, and those 2 handles on the side then become the ears of the figure. And the nose is a plastic doll that has been sort of broken up. And part of the doll is the nose, and then down below in the figure somewhere, the little leg of the doll sticks out.
The Warrior King, 1981, relates to a whole tradition of sculpture that Miró was accessing. We have found objects that are combined. These can be industrial objects or natural objects. And the point is they transform and they change from their initial identities into something else. And Miró takes what looks like a wooden spoon that extends from the king, and it might be the arm of the king, it might be the scepter, and it also might be the sex of the king as a cipher for the power and authority of the king.
Throughout the exhibition, Miró's sculptures are paired with paintings and drawings to show artistic connections.
When we look at Figure with homage to Picasso, we can see that both works employ a sort of collage type of aesthetic, an assemblage of objects.
The homage to Picasso from the late 60s, finished in 1973, which is the year of Picasso's death, is an extraordinary homage to both a friend, their relationship dates back to 1920, and also to the incredible figural imagination of Picasso, to the way in which he himself transformed what a portrait might be. This is, I think, one of the masterpieces in the exhibition. Miró's line is extraordinarily tight and assured. He has the large image of a figure with either eyes or breasts that seem to be extending, and a hand that is outstretched with a bird. And I think it's a painting that is enormously robust and refigures what a figure might be, just as Picasso had.
In the related sculpture, Figure 1968, Miró uses found objects cast in bronze to create the figural form.
They're pieces of driftwood. One piece of driftwood, another piece of driftwood on top, a piece of clay that he forms into the shape of a face. And then on top for the hat, it's a gourd. And then little forks coming out.
Though Miró's reputation as a modern artist was well established internationally by the 1960s, the repressive conditions under the Franco regime limited Miró's exposure at home.
In 1968, the Spanish state decided to put on a big Miró exhibition, and it was a very official exhibition and the first major anthology of Miró's work ever in Spain.
I think toward the end of Franco's life, the state realized that they could actually begin to capitalize on Miró's fame.
When Franco discovers that he has this international artist, he tries to use Miró as the symbol of Spain. And Miró was furious.
In response, a group of dissident artists associated with the Col·legi d'Arquitectes, or the architecture school in Barcelona, sponsored their own exhibition that was called Miró Otro, or The Other Miró. And it was a Miró who was all about aggression and spontaneity and performative gestures.
One of the things that Miró did as part of the exhibition was paint this mural on the facade of the architecture building. The mural was temporary and taken down at the end of the exhibition. It was scraped off of the windows and the building was returned to normal.
And it was to really show the kind of violence and the incredible reaction against oppression that had always been present in Miró's work.
With the death of Franco in 1975, Miró will live out the remaining 8 years of his life free to create without fear. He dies on Christmas Day, 1983, at the age of 90.
When the visitor comes into the galleries of this exhibition, I think the best thing to do is to look. The subtitle of the exhibition is The Experience of Seeing, and that's what this is about. This really is about looking.
One of the great things about this exhibition is that you don't have to know anything about Miró to enjoy the works themselves. They're graphic and colorful and bold, playful, phantasmagorical perhaps. And anyone can come in and really just enjoy the works for what they are.
I would encourage the viewer, as he or she walks into the galleries, to give themselves over to the experience of entering into a very private and idiosyncratic world. It is a Miró monde, a Miró world. To allow all of the sensations of color, of line, of form, of the physicality of the objects to impress themselves upon one's consciousness.
Because this is only the late work, which was a very fertile period for him, we see a Miró that not many of us really know. So I think a viewer needs to come to this exhibition with a totally open mind and just have fun. Because these works, yes, they're stunning, yes, they're moving, but they're also whimsical. And he was playing. He was really playing.
It really shows this tremendous creativity of an artist late in life who never slowed down, who kept working, who kept pushing the boundaries of his own creativity.
Even though he was internationally known, he didn't want for anything. He could have just retired and done nothing and walked on the beach. But he decided not to, and he challenged himself. And I think it just gives hope that we can be creative all the way up until the end, just like Miró was.
Major funding for Miró, the Experience of Seeing, is provided by a grant from the William R. Keenan Jr. Charitable Trust. And by the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV. Miró, the Experience of Seeing at the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University is on view through February 22, 2015. Information is available at www.nasher.duke.edu/Miró.
J'ai toujours les pieds sur terre et les yeux, les étoiles. Ça représente une envolée vers l'infini, vers le ciel, en quittant la terre. Voilà, c'est ça.
What he liked most about New York City was the activity. He said that it was like a punch in the face. He was so happy in New York City. He always want to come back. He loved New York City. It was electric, shocking, shooky, catchy, everything, you name it.
So it got very quiet.
I like how you got the first room, first gallery with all these paintings are just so profound. Purples and greens and blacks and yellows.
Right, so it's sort of observed reality, but then hyper-reality, right? Because those colors.
So it's a collage.
So it's a collage.
Painting collage.
Yes, exactly. So it starts as early as 1917.
Les textes qui vont suivre sont des phrases extraites d'entretiens ou d'écrits de Joan Miró. Cet arbre a autant de vie que ces animaux, il a une âme, un esprit. Ce n'est pas un tronc, des feuilles. Je me sens comme un végétal, j'ai des racines dans cette terre, rien que la terre. C'est la terre, quelque chose de plus fort que moi.
The rabbit, the rooster, the pot, the red pepper, the onion, and the depiction of the cloth is just something alive. The life force that I'm getting from the earth to really give me this kind of great food and then make me be able to just go to Paris, reinforcing my energy and my identity as a Catalan international, you know.
It's sort of an interior space, but that it's green, like the earth, like the grass, like
Very
the
earthy,
fields,
yeah.
rising up is another way that it's both a room space and a landscape space. You pick a picture down. What should we look at next?
I like this one.
Yeah?
Or should we go to the birth of the world?
Oh, let's look at this one just for a minute. Yeah, shall we?
He was already going through a great, extraordinary metamorphosis, going into the world of dreams, of perceptions, of visions at night.
Right.
The fish is just reduced to one skeleton.
Right.
The fish is sticking his red tongue out to catch a mosquito, and then the hunter comes down to have his rabbit grilled here, and then this amazing eye that is watching upon everything, as if he was like a god, a presence, spooky eye, looking upon everything, you know.
And what did Miró say? He said it's the eye of the picture that looks at us.
L'œil qui voit tout. La toile fixe le spectateur, comme des flèches. C'est le tableau qui me regarde.
He would talk about the things he would do to try to achieve a heightened state of awareness, akin to meditation, right? Just to get to that space, that place where the world drops away, right? And the imagination enters in. And it's really about letting your subjective self, which we can't avoid, color your perceptions of the external world.
Miró was able to go to the most spooky, dark, and hidden corner of his subconscious mind, to pop up and to get out all the images, to put them on canvas.
How do you think he dreamed up doing a background like that? Because really, it doesn't exist before this.
Absolutely, very simple. You are able to catch the moment just before you fall asleep. You have this kind of blurry images that are just chaotic, and you have this kind of different lights that move around. So that's the visions that Miró was catching. When you close your eyelids and you are about to fall in REM number 1.
He said, well, this red dot and the yellow thing from it, for him, represented a star.
With the female sex and the penis, and then here, this kind of spermatozoidal figure.
Si je fais un grand sexe d'homme avec testicules, c'est quelque chose de sacré pour moi. Ce n'est pas érotique. C'est comme la graine d'un arbre qui pousse sous la terre. Le tableau doit être fécond. Il doit faire naître un monde.
And then you have to have the courage to attack huge canvases and just do it. René Gaffet, the guy from Brussels, he bought it. He took it away because he was too radical. This painting could not be shown anywhere.
Yes,
because
he said everybody laughed at him.
Absolutely.
And they still, you know, if you go on our Instagram site, there are still some comments about Birth of the World that my kid could do that.
This is a real monster. The teeth are like Dracula about to suck your blood away. And this very psychedelic, wide open monster full of tragedy and despair. It recalls the battlefield of seeing people being killed by shotguns.
Je me souviens très bien de cette époque du fascisme. Je me disais, mon vieux, tu es fichu. Tu vas te coucher sur une plage et avec une canne. Ou bien tu feras des dessins. Tu ne pourras rien faire d'autre. Tout est foutu.
And didn't he always say, too, he thought with his art, it had a moral and ethical purpose.
Yes.
And that was to communicate a vision of hope.
Yes.
Or of a space beyond the squalid world
yes,
that
yes.
people were living through at those moments. So it's the pessimist who yet believes in the transcendent power of the work that he's making, or that's why he makes it, because he wants to believe that.
Look, right here. That's the Miró sculpture. Isn't that big? It's called the Moonbird. Amazing sculpture, man. So it's a very special way to portray a bird, to make it very biomorphic, because it could be a chameleon, it could be a bull. He developed these huge sizes to be able to have direct connections with the people on the streets and be part of the city where he was so happy, New York. Having the chance to be with Miró is a blessing.
I think that's firstly the way to look at it, right? We are all works in progress until it ends.